In this video, we're going to look at an R program that reads in some data and makes a pretty simple pie chart. Just show you some of the available controls that you can have over a basic pie chart in R, and then we will, at the end, make an exploding 3D pie chart from the plotrix library. So let's get started. So I'm just going to read in. I have the data CSV file on up here at this URL scene, and then I'm going to read it in and then rename the two fields to simplify them. So we see here we just have our continent names, Asia, Africa, Europe, and their areas. I think it's kilometers squared or something. Okay, I'm going to, now I can just make a pie chart and it will figure out the sort of percentages, what fraction is Asia, what fraction is Africa, and so on. But I want to display those percentages, and so I am sort of creating them here and then adding it as a field. So I'm taking a continent's area. So this is going to work on a vector, so it's going to do it for each individual continent. And I'm dividing it by the sum of continents, so that's the fraction. So I will find the first element will be the fraction of the overall area by Asia, and then the second is the fraction of area for Africa. And then I am multiplying that by 100, so I'm turning it into a percentage. And then I am rounding it to one decimal place, so it'll be, I don't know, like 24.3 or something. And then I am concatenating that because, again, I don't need this calculation. It will, but I want to display it. So then, of course, I want the percent sign. So now I'm using paste to take that number and adding in a percent sign. And then I am making it a field. I could just have it as a separate vector, but I've added it. I'm adding it as a field to my data frame. I don't know why, to show that I can. Okay. So now I have another field in my data frame called purse, and it has like 21.6%, 20.6%. And there's a space in here because that's normally what paste will do. And I would, I can put a little bit more control into my paste to say, don't put the space between them, but I'm all right with the space between them. Okay, so now on to the pie. Let's make the pie, and this is just the normal pie in R, no added libraries. So here is a pie, and I'll just show you some of the features. So the first thing in a pie is sort of how you're divvying up the pie. What are you basing it on? And this has got to be a number, of course. And so for me, the only possible number here is the area. And this is sort of a nice pie. Pies get poo-pooed, but they're good for just showing you, fractions, percentage, how much of the overall is this thing. And this is reasonable data for that because they are, there aren't too many, 7, and none of them are so small. Australia, Oceania is the smallest at 5.9. So when you get to really small percentages, the pie chart, or if you get too many or small percentages, then the pie chart can become cumbersome. But this data sort of lends itself to a pie. Okay, so the first argument was what numbers are we using, and I'm using the area field within the continents data frame. What labels do I want? Well, I wanted to see the name and I wanted the percent shown. So I wanted both name and the percentage. And so I am using paste again, and I'm working with vectors. So this will do it for every element of the vector. And I'm adding the names and a new line character and the percent. So you see that it's Asia, and then Asia is over 21.6%. So that's what the labels did. It labeled the slices of the pie, and I didn't just use simply the name. I combined the name and the percentages using paste. Main, as main always is in R graphs, is the title. The radius controls sort of how big the pie is. The default, I think, is a 0.8. So I'm making my pie a little bit bigger than the default. But if I made it 1, things start getting cut off. So 1 was too big. There's a way in which the pie slices are distributed. And when I said clockwise true, like in my data, Asia was first. And when I say clockwise true, it's going to start at 12 o'clock and sort of come around the pie in a clockwise fashion. So it was Asia, Africa. And so you see Asia first at 12, starting at 12 o'clock, and then Africa, and so on. So that's what clockwise true did. Col is the color. You could, it will just pick colors if you don't specify a color at all. I could say simply col is rainbow or rainbow 7, and it will pick out, 7 colors from the rainbow, sort of take the spectrum and divide it into 7 things. And that gives you a fairly bright, very saturated color. I made my own array of 7 colors, playing around, I guess, with web safe colors, if you will. So I'm using hex codes. So this was me controlling the colors. I don't think I chose necessarily very good colors, but just showing you that you can control the colors, or you can use them built-in sort of color schemes. There are other color schemes other than rainbow. I'll use one of them in the next one. And then another thing you can control, another argument to this pie method, is the size of the label. So because I'm giving you both the name and the percentage here, my labels were taking up a bit of space. And so I reduced the font size a little bit. So that's just basic, straight out of the box R pie graph. Okay, with maybe a trick or two here with the labels and the percents, but basically just out of the box. Now I'm going to bring in the library plotrix. This is sort of something I picked up in Excel. I liked that sort of exploding pie, and so this is a library that adds in the ability to make a 3-dimensional exploding pie. If you don't have this the first time, you'll get I'm in RStudio, so when I ran this the first time, I got a little message up here near the top that said I needed to click that little link and install. But now I have it installed, but you have to announce that you're going to use it even after you have it installed. And let's see what that looks like, and then talk about its features. So here is this exploded pie graph. Okay. And so it is, again, use the plotrix library and the pie3D method. Again, of course, the first thing is what numbers are we going to use to specify the segments, and it's, of course, the area. I'm using the same thing for the labels, the names over the percentages, so I'm playing that same trick here. Here's the size of the label, but they've just changed the name from CEX to label CEX, so it's probably maybe a little bit clearer of a name. The main is still the title. The explode is the amount that you're sort of separating the pieces from the center. So they can all sort of join up in the center. I think if that's 0, well, let me test that to be sure. There's 0. Let's run this with the 0, and they're all together, and then some exploding. That was way too much. Maybe 0.2. Okay, even that's a little bit much, but anyway. Okay, theta is this sort of angle at which you're viewing the pie. So what is 0? Let's do some extreme. We just were at 1.1, I believe. That is not very useful at all. Here's 1. And let's go for, I don't know, 1.5 to see what that's doing. So sort of that the tilt angle, I'm calling it, of what how you're viewing. Okay. What else have we got here? Colors. Col again is giving us the colors. I've decided to use one of the built-in color schemes. I thought since I'm doing the area of continents, then it made some kind of sense to use the terrain colors. So that's what I did here. And the 7 just means that I wanted 7 of them. If I choose, so there's some kind of spectrum within there, and it divides it up and says I want 7 pieces. If I put in a smaller number, then it starts to repeat. Shade this is a 3D, so this is sort of how much shading there are on the sort of sides of the pies to sort of give it the 3-dimensionality. So it can be, I think, so I went for halfway. Let's go for 1. It says between 0 and 1, so what's a shade of 1 is sort of no shading at all. Shading of 0 is probably going to be like the sides are going to be black or something. Well, that proved not to be true. There it is. Okay. Maybe I forgot to run it or save it or something. I don't know. Okay. So I thought half looked pretty good to my mind. And margin is how far you are, I think, from these edges. And so 0s, it really sort of expanded. It was almost too big. It almost was overflowing the space. And I just played around just to show you some of the different properties. There are some I didn't play with. You can see at least some of the properties if you just sort of say pi open, and then you'll see you get this little hint, and it will show you a bunch of the, not all of them. You see there's a ... so it's not showing you everything, but showing you a lot. So that gives you some hint of what some of the arguments could be. And also for the plotrix library, I sort of included here the web link for some of the documentation, and specifically pie3D was on page 140 of this document. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. Just a little simple playing around with pi in R, nothing too fancy, no ggplot, maybe another time, or certainly I've seen some good tutorials on that already on YouTube. So thanks for your attention.